I want to welcome you all here this evening. Thank you so much for being here and taking your precious time to join us. We have a wonderful speaker this evening. It's Dr. Todd Kane, and he is going to be talking about engaging students in synchronous sessions. Dr. Kane.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I always enjoy spending time with colleagues and with friends here at Ottawa. I want to give you a little background before I share my screen. So a few months ago, I put together some ideas for synchronous sessions. And the original intent was, if you're hosting a live session, on Zoom or through some other platform, what are some ways that we can engage students? What are some activities that we can use in our synchronous sessions? Now, while those synchronous sessions may not be required, they're certainly encouraged. And I'm sure some of you use those kinds of sessions for maybe your initial, when the class starts, you want to just do kind of a welcome, or you've got those students who are asking questions about the final exam or their signature assignment, that final assignment in the class, and you want to host those sessions. Or maybe you avoid hosting sessions because you think, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to say. What am I going to do? That seems like so much responsibility. And so I love doing live sessions. I do them even when I don't have to. I do them even when no one shows up and it's kind of pathetic and I'm just there by myself, but that's okay. And a lot of my colleagues have said, well, like, how do you seem to have so much fun in your sessions? And, so what are your ideas for this? I think that a lot of instructors are hesitant sometimes to do these sessions because they don't know what they're going to be doing with their students, or they're concerned that they're going to really dominate the time and they're not going to be engaging or meaningful, or that students aren't going to show up. So I want to start by just asking a question. You can use the chat pod. You can certainly unmute your microphone. So how many of you exclusively teach online classes? Maybe type me in the chat pod. I'm curious if you teach exclusively online, if you do, hybrid classes, if you do a little of maybe some traditional seated classes. Give us a framework. So Mary's teaching, Mary, Charlotte, Derek, George async. Okay, got it. Karen's doing kind of async. Used to teach in the classroom and hybrid, all online for Garth. Nice. I've done a little of all of that. Hybrid classes, high flex classes, seated traditional classes, walking into an auditorium. And so how many of you host, and I'm not talking on a regular basis, a weekly basis, just generally speaking, how many of you host live sessions for your students? Have you ever done it? Do you do it all the time, weekly, once a term, twice a term for Garth, meeting individually, Charlotte? Nice. Karen's done it a few times. So I put this guide together that I'm going to share with you. And as I wrote the guide, and I'll make sure that Karen and Andrea get a copy of this so that we can share it. Karen, however you see appropriate to get out to attendees or just to the faculty generally. But I I love hosting sessions. But one of the things when I was putting this guide together, it struck me that these activities could be used in a live session, a synchronous type session. They could become announcements in your course. They could be some of these activities that I'm going to share with you could be things you could do in your discussion forums. So as you're looking at some of these activities that I'm going to share with you tonight, be thinking about how you can do it in your classroom in a way that works well for you. Some of these things may not be appropriate to be used in those ways. And if you've always wanted to do a session, but you don't know where to start, maybe this will provide you a little guidance. My colleagues will say to me all the time, you seem like you're having so much fun in your sessions. And that's true. I have a lot of fun. I wanted to share with you, I had this audio recording made recently that I will use sometimes in my sessions, especially if I'm doing like one or one in a series. This would be the first one. So check this out.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, learners from around the world, welcome to class. Remember to mute those microphones, sit up straight, and get ready to learn and have a little fun along the way. Here is your hostess with the mostest, your guide on the other side, Professor Todd Kane. Todd, you there? Hello? Todd? Todd, you're on mute. Okay, are you ready now? Live from Bend, Oregon, where the beer flows freely and deer outnumber people, here he is. Take it away, Todd.
You know, we all know that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. The cowboy version of that is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, so you better make him thirsty. I want my students to want to come to my live sessions, and I think it's totally appropriate for us to have fun and have a good time. You know, we ask instructors to carry a big load. You're expected to be subject matter experts. You're expected to know the systems that we have. You've got to know all the deadlines. You've got to provide meaningful feedback. You've got to be active in those discussions. You've got to post announcements that help students. Oh, and by the way, we'd like you to be really good newscasters and be able to host sessions. I think that it all starts with having a good time. So I want to share, let me grab, I got so much on my screen opened up here. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to share with you this booklet that I put together. We're just going to talk through some of these activities. I'm not going to take up the whole hour tonight. I would love your thoughts though, so feel free to share. Let me share this with you and just confirm that you can see my screen. You see these, it says activity 1 at the top there. So I put together a list of a bunch of different activities that we can use in a synchronous type session. And I wanted to share some of those with you. Activity 1, remember the motivation. You know, every single one of our students is here for a reason. In fact, a lot of our students as adult learners are here because they want to get a better job, or they want to advance in their career, or they want to start a career. One of the things, though, I think that they all have in common is that at the end of the day, they want to get a better education so that they can make more money and take better care of the people that they love. It's an important thing. Now, all of our students have a motivator, and if you ask them, you'll get different answers. I'm motivated by money. I'm motivated by advancing. I'm motivated by my kids, my spouse, my grandparents. They all have those particular motivators, and almost all of them at some point on that educational journey forget that motivation. Life gets hard. School gets hard. They're trying to navigate a pandemic. They're trying to work full time and take care of their families and their friends and have some kind of a social life. And so one of the activities that I do very early on in a class, whether that be in a session like this or through an announcement or through emails, is I want to discover that motivation. I want to ask those students what motivates them. Why are they here? So what you'll see on the screen is a little background on this activity and then the approach that I take. I'm not going to go through each of these with you. I'm going to kind of talk generally about them. But in general, I ask students very early on, why are you here? What motivates you? And I keep a little list, a little spreadsheet of that motivation so that I can use it against them later on down the road. When they're struggling, maybe I'll ask them that I'll send an email and, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. You had mentioned your kids. I hope they're well, or just to remind them of that motivation. I also will use that motivator in their feedback. So if somebody's motivated because they really want to advance in their career, I may say something like, I know that your motivation is really career focused, and I hope that you're making the connections between this activity and what you can do in the future. If we can find out from them what motivates them and then remind them of that motivation, I think that's really helpful, and it helps students complete. And it also lets them know that you care about them, I think, individually. Activity number 2, breakout rooms. So breakout rooms are a great way in a session like this to take a group of people, put them into a breakout room with a very specific task. Maybe they're reviewing a case study. Maybe they're discussing the course learning objectives. Maybe they're working on some little activity together, and then they come back to the bigger classroom and they share their observations. You know, I think that one of the things about these activities, and the reason I use these activities, is because I really don't want to be the sage on the stage. I'm really much more interested in that guide on the side approach. I also don't want to be the one to do all the heavy lifting. Let the students do some of this work. And if you break these students out into little groups with little activities, maybe that are related to the objectives of the course or that particular week, for 5 or for 10 minutes, it allows them to build community, and it allows them to kind of demonstrate that ability to work well in teams. Again, you'll see the background on this activity and the approach that I take, pretty straightforward. Muddiest point. So I don't remember where I got this from, but I just want you to know it didn't come from me. Years ago, I read this article. I think it was an article or it was a guide. And the author was talking about research that shows it's a terrible idea to ask students if they have any questions, that students don't know what they don't know. But it's a better idea to ask them, what's the muddiest point? You read chapter 3 last week. What's muddy? What's unclear? What would you like to discuss? What do you want to explore more? So sometimes I'll ask students before a session, come to this class, this session tonight, and share with me what is the muddiest thing this week? How can I help to clear that up? So again, the background on this and the approach. Another activity here, this is kind of activity 4, this is pre-reading and discussion. You know, a lot of times when you host these kind of sessions, depending on timing, you know, when the term starts, when the week is, students won't come prepared. They haven't read the book. You know, if the class starts on Monday and you're having your session on Monday, they probably haven't jumped in yet. But if you kind of tell students, hey, a couple of days before, put a calendar reminder out there for yourself, a couple of days before a session, hey, we're going to be discussing this particular concept tonight, and I want you to pay attention to this particular chapter because we're going to have a chat about that. And so you've got a little pre-reading type assignment. That's another activity that I will use frequently. I love case studies. I teach in healthcare, so we have case studies for everything. And regardless of your subject matter expertise, I'm sure you know where to find cases that are appropriate for that subject matter. And using case studies is really a great way to, again, demonstrate or have students be able to fine-tune and practice those teamwork type of assignments, but also practice and put into practice research, critical thinking, develop those analytical skills. What I like to do is take a case, a particular case study, and then I myself will go out and research, like, what do the experts say about these 2 or 3 things? I'll present that case to the students. I'll have them review that case, and then I will get their feedback. I'll see what are your thoughts. You know, give them a chance to do some analysis, and then I'll share with them what the experts say about that, so that they can kind of start to make those connections. Another activity is a 1-minute paper. This one I actually will use sometimes in my classroom, not in a synchronous session, but I'll just use in my classroom as an announcement. I'll say, I would like all of you to take 1 to 3 minutes, set a timer, stick to 1 to 3 minutes, and I'd like you to just free write on what you've learned so far this week. There's no right or wrong answer. Don't worry about formatting, none of that. And just email me your 1-minute paper. Or if we have the ability to create a discussion forum, they can post their 1-minute paper in that discussion forum, and they can kind of learn from each other. You know, we teach and learn together, and I find that it's really helpful when you have those opportunities for the peer-to-peer type interaction instead of just like student to instructor or instructor to student. Those student to student interactions are important as well. And those 1-minute papers help to encapsulate what they're learning that week. I have this fear, and I think part of this comes from working in healthcare and teaching in healthcare. I call this the lost class. You know, we've all taken one, right? The class you've taken, you take it for 8 weeks or whatever. And then like 3 weeks later, if somebody asked you what that class was about, you like stare blankly and you can't really answer that question. That terrifies me, especially because we're talking healthcare. You know, so if I'm teaching a healthcare ethics class, I really want students to know about the ethical decision-making framework, and the thought that they don't and they can't articulate that learning or that knowledge causes me great concern. This 1-minute paper does that. And I think it helps to also build confidence for those students. So they'll say, oh, we learned about ethical decision-making this week, and I didn't know this framework even existed, and here's kind of how it works. It may not be super academic. It's probably got spelling. The 1-minute paper has spelling errors, nothing's cited, nothing's referenced, but it's also not worth a grade. It's more of a retention activity and a confidence booster. Games are fun to play in the class. A lot of our classes, you know, in the LMS may have like learning activities. We can use those certainly in these sessions. I've played around. I don't know if you guys have any of you ever used Kahoot or been a participant in a session where they're using Kahoot. Kahoot's you can just look it up. Just look up Kahoot. Kahoot's pretty cool. You start your class and you basically send all the students a link, and you ask questions throughout the class, and they're competing against each other, answering those questions using their smartphone. So you can do that, you know, as a way to kind of reinforce the learning for the week, those key learning objectives for the week, or this week, you know, focus on that stuff for last week is playing a little game. And gamification is a huge thing in instructional design these days. And in fact, we're starting to see a lot more gamification take place in the development of courses. So I would encourage you to check out Kahoot, or maybe think about ways that you can, you know, play games with your students in these sessions. During the pandemic, I would occasionally do these Kahoot games, and it was not a schedule. It was just like, hey, on Saturday night, I'm going to open up a session. If you guys want to drop in and, you know, play a couple of Kahoot games, feel free to do that, and students would show up. So check that out. Live research. So I've been doing this for a couple of years when I host synchronous sessions, and students really appreciate this activity. So I'll just use some random example here. Let's say this week the assignment is to research and write a paper on some of the top ethical concerns in healthcare today. And what I'll do is I'll set a clock. I'll give everyone like 10 minutes to conduct research on that topic. And they have to conduct research, copy the link, put it on a Word doc, and write a like 2-sentence little summary, kind of like a little annotated bib. Like, what does this article say? And then they come back into the classroom and they share in the chat pod the link, the article that they're using, and what they discovered about that article. And it really leads to a lot of great conversations, and also conversations about that's probably not really credible research. You know, you may not want to be using that. And then that leads to other conversations that can help students as well. So I think practicing that research, what students always tell me, I had a student tell me not too long ago, we did an activity like this, and she said, okay, thank you for saving me 2 hours of my life staring blankly at my screen. And, you know, because those research skills, they don't come naturally to a lot of people, and it takes time to develop. And so these kind of like, you know, encapsulate this in a very specific time frame, may get some of those creative juices flowing. Scavenger hunts. This is a great activity to do in a session like this, but you can also incorporate this into an announcement in your class. Welcome to class. We're going to do a scavenger hunt. I have 10 questions to ask you, and the first person who emails me back gets, you know, mad bragging rights. And it may be, what's the late policy of the course? Where do you locate the assignment rubrics? What's the final assignment in this class? You come up with these kind of questions and you use it in a scavenger hunt form. This also saves you a lot of trouble down the road having to answer questions that have already been asked and answered. Student presentations, I mentioned earlier this idea of we don't need to do all the heavy lifting. Every time I've asked students, hey, would you like to, if you're interested in presenting briefly on your paper from last week, or if you'd like to put together a little PowerPoint on the topic, or if the assignment is already a PowerPoint, hey, if you're interested in presenting that to the class, would you let me know? I always have some volunteers that are willing to do that. And again, that peer-to-peer interaction, I think, is so important. So I'll let students present, and then the class can ask questions and engage in conversation, and I'm not doing all of the work. Quizzes. So we've gotten away in instructional design a lot from like assessments in the form that many of us may remember them, taking a test. But I think there's still a great use for them. Again, a good confidence booster. So, asking quiz questions, even posting an announcement or posting it in your discussion, hey, I've got a quiz question for the week. And let's see who can answer that question. It doesn't have to be a graded activity, but those quiz questions can really, again, build confidence and to make sure that they kind of leave the week knowing that they've met the learning objectives. Reflection journals, kind of similar to the one minute paper and that whole idea of I don't want this to be a lost class. Asking students once a week to take a few minutes and reflect on the learning and write it down. One of the things I remind them of is, if they're going for, at some point they're going to go out for an interview. And if somebody says to them, talk to me about the classes you took, or what did you learn in this particular class? A lot of times students don't have that language. They have a hard time articulating what they learned in a particular class. And these, I share with them, use the language from the syllabus, use the learning objectives, the course descriptions, but also write a little reflection kind of at the end of every class, a 3 to 5 sentence paragraph. What did I learn in this class? Throw that all on a Word doc. It represents at the end of this educational journey all the great things you learned. And it also gives you language for resumes, cover letters, interviews. So another way to get them to reflect on their learning. This is an easy one. Students love it when I do a review of the assignment, especially if it's a complex assignment or it's a heavy lift for them. Not giving them the answers, not telling them how to do it, but maybe providing them a little bit of a jumping off point, saying, hey, we've got in this class, in the final week, you're going to be doing a paper or a presentation. Here's some things to watch out for. Here's some things to consider. Here's some times where students go off the rails. That can really kind of reduce their anxiety and get them more excited about doing a particular activity than stressed out about doing an activity. And I'm not suggesting that being stressed out is a bad thing. I mean, we've all been students, right? So we've all had those classes where we couldn't wait till they ended. Speaking of ending, I've only got a few more, so I'll be getting you guys out of here soon. I saw this guy one time who was talking about, he was doing a presentation and it was like a top 10 list. And it was like, Todd's top 10 tips for whatever. And he said the reason that he always did the top 10 thing is so that if he sucked, at least you would know how much longer he's going to suck for. So there's only a few more activities. Discussion. So this is an activity that's kind of fun. Most of our classes have weekly discussions, and I will do something similar with an activity earlier where I'll say, this week we're talking about healthcare ethics. Go do 2 minutes of research on the biggest issues, ethical issues in healthcare today. Let's come back here and have a conversation about that. Let them lead that conversation. What did they find? What did they discover? What surprised them? Through that helps them to start to formulate a response to that discussion. It also gives them more language and information for those follow-up posts, which can be so challenging for many students. What do I say? Everybody said everything. Video field trips, I think super helpful. Khan Academy, TED, regardless of your subject matter, you probably know where to locate videos that are meaningful and that add value to the learning and to the classroom, using those, watching those with your students in a live session, or sharing them through an announcement or through discussions, can really be a way to get students thinking and just kind of start those that analytical process. Again, maybe some things that surprise them. So I love taking students on little video field trips. They like it too. Flashcards, this kind of goes back to the quiz thing. I create flashcards for my classes a lot of times where it's just a PowerPoint slide deck. And, you know, so it's like the question on one slide and the answer on the next slide, the question on one slide, the answer on the next slide. 3, 4, 5 of those. It's a great way to wrap up a week. And again, something you could share as an announcement and in the discussions. I also want to just add before I forget this, and I think I've got like one more activity, but double dip on some of this stuff. Like if there's some activities here that you think, oh, I can do that in a synchronous session, great, do that. But if you're like, I think I could do something like that in my announcement this week and I can put it in my discussion, do that. You know, we know that some students just don't read announcements. I mean, but they may see it in the discussion or vice versa. So don't be afraid to like double dip, repurpose some of these activities in whatever form you're comfortable with. Polling is a great, you know, you can use polls in Zoom sessions. You can poll your students in the classroom, sometimes within the LMS itself, or you can just ask poll questions. And it's a great way to guide students and to, you know, just ask questions to get to know them, to get their thoughts on particular subjects, and to build community, which I think at the end of the day it's a challenge in an online environment. You know, how do you build community? There's much written about that. And I will tell you, I don't feel like an expert at any of this. One of the things that I love about teaching and working in this world is that I never feel like I got it. Like I never feel like I've arrived. There's always so much to learn, new technology that comes your way, new approaches we learn from each other. So you know, try some of these things and don't be afraid, to fail. Speaking of failure, I love this idea of teaching through storytelling. Now, I worked in healthcare and I was the CEO of a healthcare company for a number of years. So I have lots of great stories, great professional stories. Now, when I first started doing this in 2008, I made sure that I only told the stories that made me look good. Like I only told the stories where I was successful doing something. I soon ran out of material. And what I discovered is that my students really like to hear about the times that I really screwed things up, where I really made a bad hire, or I made a bad decision, or I didn't fully research that. And so tell those stories, because our students tell us time and time again, I want to hear from my instructor. I want to know more about how it, you know, how this all plays out in the real world. So Garth says, do you get pushback from students who say they signed up for an online, they don't want to be asked to participate with live discussions? Absolutely. But in our case here, these sessions are encouraged but not required. So I never require that they come. I do always record the sessions and I share that with the students, because some students won't or can't come, but they still may watch the session. And I don't hinge them being successful on coming to these sessions. So students who come to these sessions, they're not getting anything extra in the grade or their paycheck. It's really more of a way to kind of enhance this. But yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Some students really say, look, I don't have time to participate in synchronous activities, which is the whole reason I'm doing online. That's totally legit. We also have this other group of students who tell us, I wish this class had some kind of live session element, or depending on the subject matter, you know, I know that in some of the computer science classes where there are programming classes where students are like, wow, doing this all online is really challenging. So again, not required. I never require. I always make it optional I try to make it fun, and I always record it for those who can't come, and whether they watch it or not, they're really on a level playing field. I would argue this can make the experience a little more fun, a little more enjoyable, but certainly not for everyone. So great question, bro. I gave you guys just here a little if you're going to host a session, if you want to try one, here's kind of a sample agenda that you might want to follow. These don't have to be long. Sometimes I do like 10, 15-minute sessions going over a particular assignment. And by the way, if nobody comes and you record the session on your final paper in a particular class, you get to reuse that material from term to term, assuming you're teaching the same class. I told you I wouldn't take up the whole hour. Questions, comments, concerns, and I'd love to know if this was helpful, and if you've got maybe some ideas as to how you might be able to use some of this in your class, whether it's through a session or in announcements or discussions. Anyone?
Can you hear me, Todd? I have a question.
Yeah, fire away.
What I'm wondering is, days a week, have you had better success on particular days and times of the week to offer these sessions?
Yeah, great question. I think that I would like to say it's awesome to offer them at the beginning of a class or the beginning of a week, but again, most students aren't really doing that. So I get more attendance when I offer sessions on like a Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I've had some really great success. And this is, probably quite telling. I've had some great success hosting unorganized sessions for a half hour on Sunday, kind of like office hours, hey, drop in, because if students are waiting till the end of the week to get the work done, or they haven't really jumped in. And I will usually do that kind of thing while I'm grading. So I'm kind of double dipping. But yeah, I think later in the week is a little better. And try a weekend one. And I've tried them all. I've done like noon on a Saturday or 9 o'clock at night on Sunday. But yeah, you just have to kind of gauge your student. Another thing that you might consider is, if you're going to host a session, let's say you're going to do one over the course of a term, put out a doodle poll, to the students and say, hey, I'm thinking of hosting a live session. I'd like to gauge your interest. If I were to host a live session talking about the final project in this class, what would be the best day for you guys? Majority rules. And I'll record it for those who can't come. Great question, Mary. Thanks. Anyone else? Awesome, Garth. I'm glad you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Yeah, you're so welcome. I will, like I said, I'll send to both Andrea and Karen the latest, greatest of this document, and they can do that magic that they do and make sure to get it to everyone. Karen, I think we're good. Do you have?
Wait, I have one more question, since nobody's asking. I didn't want to take over. Sorry. Your discussion, which I thought was interesting. I have some students that just don't engage well in discussion, which we all, know that what that's like. And do you ever do it in lieu of them logging? I mean, is there any way that you can give them credit for coming to a live session as opposed to typing in their questions in the discussion?
Well, first, let me just give you the disclaimer and say, I am not an administrator. And so I tend to practice the ask for forgiveness later approach instead of permission. I think that's a really interesting idea. I haven't done that, but I can see where you could absolutely make the argument that it would replace the actual discussion. I guess the downside is then those students, are we using, I don't know how administratively how the school is using those discussions. Are they using them in some way to document like attendance or student engagement, that kind of thing? Karen may be able weigh in on that.
So one thing that I have noticed, and one class I was teaching made use of this, what's called voice threads. So students are recording themselves. They can record a video of themselves, or they can record just an audio. So they're not typing, they're actually talking their responses to the discussion. So that's one way that they're incorporating this type of it's still asynchronous, but it doesn't require them to do a lot of typing. They can just discuss the answer.
And VoiceThread, and VoiceThread is a great tool. From a simplicity standpoint, you may want to also check out Audacity. Audacity is just a free version. You can just do audio recordings. It's really simple, which explains why I like it. And so I've had students who've used Audacity to record their initial post or those follow-up posts. And that's another way, as Karen said, kind of to make it a little more interactive and a little more lively, and hear each other's voices.
Yeah, and we had a session for faculty a few weeks ago where a person was talking about giving feedback and good ways to give feedback, and he was advocating that instead of us typing a lot of feedback, that we do video feedback for students as well.
Yeah, they love that. I've done audio feedback, video feedback, and I think that some of it for me depends on like the mood, the day. Like, do I really feel like being on camera? I haven't done my hair or whatever. So I think that's a great way though to just mix it up. And look, I think at the end of the day, I want to have fun doing my work. And so that's really why I started coming up with some of these activities and stuff, because it makes it more fun for me. And when I'm having fun, I find that my students have more fun. I wanted to mention, Mary, also, I have if you want to shoot me an email, I have a presentation that I put together a couple of years ago. It's a student-facing presentation on getting the most out of the discussions. And so I would be happy to send that to you, and you're welcome to use that in your classroom and just say, hey, I have a colleague who put this together. So if you're struggling with what to say in the discussions, and there's a model that I use in the discussions that I call AAR. It's ask, affirm, redirect. So if you don't know what to say, ask a question, and with the next response, affirm something that they said. And on the next response, maybe redirect to some outside resource or something. So I have this little screencast video thing. It's captioned and all that. So you should be, totally good using it. If you want it, shoot me an email and I'll send you a link to it. Great questions. I will end this session the way I end all of my sessions with my students, and it's totally appropriate for my colleagues. The most important thing that you need to do tonight is go tell someone you love that you love them. I appreciate you spending a little time with me this evening. I hope it was helpful, gives you some ideas, maybe get some of those creative juices flowing. If I can ever help, my email's on the screen there, todd.kane@ottawa.edu. Mobile's there as well, and my office number. I'm so proud to be part of this team. Thank you guys so much for putting up with me for 41 minutes.
Well, thank you all for being here and taking your time to spend with us this evening. It was such a wonderful presentation, and thank you so much, Todd, for volunteering to give this presentation today. We appreciate it so much.
My pleasure. Good night, everyone.
Good night.